Russian President Vladimir Putin's aide arrived in Istanbul instead of him to represent Moscow in peace talks with Kyiv.
A draft law to punish organizations that accept foreign funding if they, for example, influence democratic debate or portray the rule of law in Hungary in a negative light was proposed by a lawmaker in Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's ruling Fidesz party.
Bárkire ráhúzható ez a korlátozás, bárki célponttá válhat, mert gyakorlatilag ma Magyarországon a független sajtó és a civil szervezetek jelentős része az részesül valamiféle külföldi támogatásban, ha máshogy nem, akkor részt vesz például uniós pályázatokban, tehát onnantól kezdve pedig ennek a törvénynek a hatálya alá kerülhet.
Under the draft, even a micro-donation from a dual national or an EU grant can be considered foreign funding. And with the threat of debilitating fines and a ban on domestic donor funding, ultimately ordinary Hungarian citizens will suffer, according to a spokesperson for the NGO, A Hang.
Az első értelmezésünk szerint ezt nem tekinthetjük másnak, mint egy nyílt hadüzenetnek, vagy ha úgy tetszik, egy egészpályás letámadásnak, amit a kormány most a civil társadalom ellen intézett, hiszen látjuk azt, hogy itt nem csak most már a megbélyegzésről van szó, hanem konkrétan jogi és egyéb eszközökkel való ellehetetlenítésről.
According to the draft, the Office for the Protection of Sovereignty, created last year, will decide on the offending organizations. The body responsible for implementing the so-called Transparency Bill does not itself even operate from the address of its official registration.
Természetesen kértünk reakciót a Fidesztől is, de nem kaptunk választ. Az érintett civil szervezetek szerint olyan tágak lesznek a jogszabályi keretek, hogy teljesen az alkalmazó hatóságon múlik, hogy melyik szervezetet akarja megbüntetni, és melyiket nem. A civil szervezetek átláthatóságáról egy olyan hivatal fog majd dönteni, ami itt a hátam mögött látható irodaházban székel, de még egy táblája sincs. Tanács Gábor, Euronews, Budapest.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's aide Vladimir Medinsky arrived in Istanbul to represent Moscow in peace talks with Kyiv. Medinsky is a fierce supporter of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. He was the editor of a book which frames Russia's invasion as a continuation of the Soviet fight against Nazi Germany. Putin rejected his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky's proposal for a face-to-face meeting in the Turkish city, which the Ukrainian leader had hoped would lead to a full ceasefire. It comes after Putin had suggested himself over the past weekend that Russia and Ukraine would sit down for direct talks, to which Zelensky promptly responded. US President Donald Trump had also said he was considering traveling to Istanbul for the talks. However, he also won't be present. Instead, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and senior envoy Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg are representing the US.
Civil society and non-governmental organizations have slammed Hungary's proposed Russian-style foreign agent law, labeling it an attempt to silence the independent press. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz delivered his first speech to the Bundestag where he pledged big reforms. The newly appointed leader made big promises on various pressing issues, from the war in Ukraine to the stagnant German economy. One of the big reforms he's promised is to increase Berlin's role in the European Union.
Ich habe den europäischen Institutionen eine neue Verlässlichkeit Deutschlands zugesagt. Die Zeiten, in denen sich Deutschland bei wesentlichen Fragen der europäischen Politik einfach der Stimme enthält, diese Zeiten sollen vorbei sein.
Merz said that he's held 2 phone calls with US President Donald Trump recently regarding Ukraine. The German leader says he'll do all he can to bridge the gap between the US and Europe to preserve the political unity of the West.
Es ist von überragender Bedeutung, dass der politische Westen, meine Damen und Herren, sich nicht spalten lässt. Und deshalb werde ich weiter alle Anstrengungen unternehmen, um auch weiterhin größtmögliche Einigkeit zwischen den europäischen und den amerikanischen Partnern herzustellen.
Merz also promised to revive an unusually sluggish German economy plagued by years of stagnation.
Wir werden deshalb alles daran setzen, Deutschlands Wirtschaft wieder auf Wachstumskurs zu bringen. Wir wollen investieren und reformieren. Beides gehört zusammen. Auch in der Wirtschaftspolitik bin ich der Überzeugung, wir können aus eigener Kraft heraus wieder zu einer Wachstumslokomotive werden, auf die die Welt mit Bewunderung schaut.
He's also expressed his desire to boost the country's defenses and continue to fulfill NATO obligations. The German Chancellor also committed to reducing bureaucracy, offering tax incentives for businesses, and fostering more trade deals within the EU.
French Prime Minister François Bayrou faced one of his most politically sensitive moments yet on Wednesday evening, testifying under oath before a parliamentary committee examining what he knew or didn't know about decades of abuse at a Catholic school in southwestern France. The committee is investigating Bayrou's potential knowledge of allegations at the Notre-Dame de Bétham school, where 200 complaints of sexual and physical abuse have been filed since February last year. Bayrou swore that he knew nothing about the violence and even denounced a political instrumentalization of the affair. He also claimed to have learned of the allegations through the press and denied ever having any sort of insider information. Despite it being a very personal issue for the Prime Minister, this Catholic school is the same school where his wife once taught and that his children also attended years ago. The political bombshell dropped earlier this year after media reports suggested that Bayrou may have known about the abuse as early as the 1990s and tried to cover it up back when he was the French Minister of Education. Another major turning point of the scandal, last month his own daughter came out and said that she was beaten by a priest from that same school when she was 14 years old. She said that she never told her father about the abuse. And while Bayrou may have survived multiple no-confidence votes and a fractured parliament since his appointment last December, the Notre-Dame de Bétham affair may prove to be harder to outrun.
Predsjednik Europskog savjeta Antonio Costa stigao je u Prištinu u vreme institucionalne i parlamentarne krize, kada i više od 3 meseca od završetka izbora nema formirane skupštine, a nema ni na vidiku kada će se formirati nova kosovska vlada. Također, kosovske vlasti u zadnjih dana zatvaraju i preostale institucije koje funkcionišu u sistemu Republike Srbije, a radile su na severu Kosova. Antonio Costa se danas sastao sa predsjednicom Kosova Vjosom Osmani i premijerom u tehničkom mandatu, ali i poslanikom Albinom Kurtijem, a posle sastanka sa Osmani, sa zajedničke konferencije za medije, je poručio da dijalog između Kosova i Srbije je ključni za nastavak daljih evrointegracija i Kosova i Srbije. Anđelka Ćup, Euronews Srbija.
A major fire followed an explosion at a chemical warehouse in Alcalá de Guadaira near Sevilla, Spain, on Wednesday afternoon. The Plansur company evacuated staff from its Laret industrial estate facility after alerts around 1:20 p.m. Authorities called the incident worrying due to the fire's scale and the unknown burning chemicals. One person suffered slight burns, while toxic smoke forced 80,000 people in the area to stay indoors. Some homes near the A92 motorway were also evacuated. Civil Protection issued mobile alerts in Alcalá de Guadaira, advising residents to close windows and doors and use masks. Andalusia's regional government activated its Level 1 emergency plan, with firefighters from 7 stations tackling the blaze. Plansur's large chemical distribution facility has a massive smoke plume, reportedly visible over 80 kilometers away. Emergency crews are working to control the fire and prevent its spread. This is a legal and political thunderclap. The General Court of the European Union has condemned the European Commission's lack of transparency in the negotiations on vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic. The judges annulled the Commission's refusal to disclose the text messages exchanged between its president and the head of Pfizer. These text messages between Ursula von der Leyen and the pharmaceutical giant took place during negotiations on the purchase of almost 2 billion doses. The Commission maintains that it does not hold these text messages and that their content was insubstantial. Not a convincing line of defense.
For the moment, it's still unclear why they thought that this message did not include important information. So this needs to be clarified. And also, in a way, we can see that in general, there is still a lot of secrecy around this. We still don't know. It's still unclear if these messages were deleted, if, as the courts say, were deleted on purpose, automatically, what happened there. So in our opinion, since the beginning, text message should be included.
The court criticized the Commission for failing to provide credible evidence to explain why it was unable to provide these text messages at the request of a journalist from the New York Times. In addition, the judges considered that the institution was unable to clearly specify whether or not these text messages had been deleted. The Commission remains unclear on this issue.
I didn't say that any messages were deleted. What I did say were that, as in any access to documents request, what we first do is to check, are there any registered documents that fall within the scope of the request? We did that, didn't find any.
The Commission considers that the judgment does not call into question the procedures for registering documents, but rather a lack of explanation. It interprets the court decision as an indication that it will have to justify itself better in the future.